Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mirtz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Kuf Samach Hey, Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the very bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch on Kuf Samach Hey Amid Aleph. We are holding in Siman Shin Chaf Ches Sif Yud Zayin. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Beis Yisrael, Hanusinu Batzaru Bashivya, Ha'im Dim Bein Bayamu Bein Bayabasha, Hamakayim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yitziem Yitzaru L'Rvacha, Me'afela L'Oiro Mishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagala V'Zman Kariv and Emar Amen. Our learning should be a schus for Refuah Shalema for Yeshua Levi Barahuva Malkachana, Gila Shifra Bas Ilan Udal, Yitzchak Ben Tzion Ben Dusha, Rivka Bashir Aleach, Havadasa Baserel. They should all have a refuah shalema b'sar shar chayla Yisrael. We are mispalo that b'schus the limud HaTorah of Klal Yisrael, the Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over every member of Klal Yisrael b'chol makom shehem. So we're continuing to learn the halachas of what one may do and may not do on Shabbos on behalf of a chayla. These halachas are extremely complex, and really, when a shaila comes up, it behooves somebody, if he's not sure, it behooves somebody to ask a shaila. Having said that, we saw in the Mechaber, if you're dealing with a chayla sheyesh by sakana, even if it's a suffix sakana, that is not a time to ask shailas. It's the middle of the night, and if there's even a suffix sakana, and there's nobody to ask, there's no wasting time. If there's a suffix sakana, you must go do whatever you need to do. You need to call somebody, you need to jump in the car and transfer somebody to the hospital, you need to cook up something, you need to turn on a light, you need to heat up water, whatever it is that you need to do, whether it's a daraisa, whether it's a drabanan, whether you're doing it through the agency of an Ein Yehudi or you're doing it yourself, if there's even a suffix of sakanas nefashis, you must be Mechal Shabbos. When we're talking about there's no sakana, there's no danger, there's no rush, it's not bohol, it's not an emergency, and then shilas come up, so then really we're learning the guidelines over here, but to get down to the nitty-gritty halacha l'maisa of these shilas is really to a large extent beyond the scope of what we can do here. We can give you the background, we can give you some guidelines, but shilas will have to be asked. Okay. So, picking up now, Siman Shin Chav Ches Sif Yud Zayin, says the Mechaber, and this is the type of situation that does come up, Baruch Hashem, much more frequently than the shaila of a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Says the Mechaber, chayla shenafal machmas cholyoy lemishkav, somebody who, because he's ill, he's bedridden. Ve'en by sakana, but he's not in danger. This is not a chayla sheyesh by sakana. It's not a chayla sheyesh by suffix sakana. It's a chayla. He's sick, and because of the fact that he's sick, he's neifel mishkav. You know, Haga, or the Ramah says, maybe he's not neifel mishkav. Oy sheyesh lo mechayish, or he's ill, and he's not feeling well. Shemitztayer, he's definitely bitzar. The cholam imenu kol gufay. And as a result of the illness, and as a result of the tsar, he's chayli kol haguf. His entire body is affected. Sha'az, in such a situation, afal pi shaholich, even though he might not be in bed, but kinafal lemishkav dami, he has the same din as a neifal lemishkav. So, let's be clear. Who exactly is this chayla that we're talking about here? What exactly is this description? So the way the Mechaber describes it is, he's a chayla shenafal machmas chayla lemishkav. Because of his illness, he's confined to bed. He's bedridden. Now, various poskim say, it doesn't have to be that he's actually bedridden. There are times when somebody is ill, and he's suffering, but he's not in bed, because being in bed won't help him. Being in bed is not the thing that's making him feel better. He might be hoilich, he might be up, he might be on his feet, but if you would tell him if you lay down for an hour, you'll feel better, he definitely will go ahead and lay down. The poskim say that that's also called nafal mishkav. Nafal mishkav is a more high-level description of the type of chayli that we're talking about. The person is sick and he is suffering, and therefore he's definitely has severely diminished capabilities, diminished capacity. He can't function well. That's also what it means, chayli kalaguf. I'll give you a very good example of chayli kalaguf. Somebody who has the flu. Now, the flu, by the way, I mean, I think most people know this and realize this, but the flu could become very severe. And somebody who has the flu, especially an older person or somebody who's immunocompromised or somebody who has underlying health issues, the flu could definitely turn into a chayil sheish by sakana. But if we're talking about a younger person, healthy, no underlying issues, and he's not presenting with anything overly concerning. It's more, so to speak, garden variety flu. The flu is going around. He got the flu. He's got a fever. He's got body aches. He's got a headache. He's got, cold symptoms. He sounds horrible. He looks horrible. He feels horrible. But there's nothing that you look at him and say, oh my goodness, this is getting serious. No, what's the matter with Yankel? He has the flu. Okay. Now, he might get up, and he might go to the kitchen, and he might sit by the kitchen table to go drink a tea. But he's got body aches. He hurts all over. He doesn't want to do anything. That is called chayli kalaguf. Chayli kalaguf doesn't mean that his hand is swollen, and his feet are swollen, and his ear hurts, and he's got the sniffles in his nose, and his eyes are aching, and his stomach is bothering him. So that the sickness is affecting every part of his body. Every part of his body is sick. A person who has a bad case of strep and he has 101.5 fever and he feels horrible and he doesn't want to move, that is called chayli kalaguf. It is a chayli that is affecting his entire body. His entire body is abgeschwachend. He's weakened. He's diminished throughout his entire body. He can't use his body in the normal way. That is called a chayli kalaguf. So you want to know what kind of chayla we're talking about over here? We could very easily be talking about somebody who has a bad case of strep. He has 101.5, 102 fever. He feels crummy. He started antibiotics already, but the antibiotics haven't kicked in yet. He is, most cases, a chayla shenafa machmas chalya lemishkav. He's definitely going to spend more time in bed than he otherwise would. And if the doctor would tell him, I'm telling you, get into bed, and you'll feel better 3 days faster if you stay in bed, he would definitely get into bed. Like the Ramah says, he has a meichai shemitztar, he's suffering, v'chala mimenu kol gufay. His entire body is affected by it. That's the chayla that we're talking about here. We're talking about the guy who has a normal case of the flu. We're talking about a guy who has a bad case of strep throat. We're talking about a guy who's got a nasty virus. I'm not talking about the nasty virus of pandemic fame, where, again, if there's even a suffix of sakana, different story. Over here, it's garden variety, things that people contract. It's common that people contract these things. They're sick for a few days, and then Baruch Hashem, they get better and they bounce back. But that is the chayla she'ein boi sakana, who's nafel mishkav, who's mitztar, and it's chala mimenu kol gufay. That's what we're talking about. What's the halacha of such a person? Says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mechaber, second line down. Oimrim le'ena Yehudi lasais loy refuah. Amira la'akum, no problem. You could do Amira La'akum, and you could ask the Ein Yehudi to do whatever is necessary. The Ein Yehudi could go make a refuah for him. The Ein Yehudi could do whatever you want. You asking the Ein Yehudi to do it is an Issa D'Rabbanan. So you're being over the Issa D'Rabbanan of Amira La'akum, and you're having the akum do the malacha. You're allowed to do that for such a chayla. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Memhei, the Ein Bei Sakana Ritzayna Loimar. When we're talking here about a chayla she'ein bei sakana, we mean Ein Loi Sakanas Maves. He's not in danger. He's not in deathly danger. Ubein yesh by sakanas aver, Eloi. It doesn't matter if he has sakanas aver or he doesn't have sakanas aver. The bottom line is there's no sakanas nefashis here. There isn't even a suffix sakanas nefashis. Eis Katan Mem, Oimrim, you could ask an Ein Yehudi to take care of him. You could ask an Ein Yehudi to do things for him. V'davka kishet tzarich laharafua b'Shabbos atzmai. However, realize that when the Mechaber says you could use Amir La'akum and you could have an Eini Yehudi do things for him, it's only if it's things that are necessary to be done now on Shabbos. Hakishe'ein Sarach La b'Shabbos, but don't ask an Eini Yehudi to do things that do not have to be done for the Chayla on Shabbos. If it could wait, Yamted on Matzai Shabbos. Wait till Matzai Shabbos. Ava Kishiyeh Sakana, also Lahamtin. But again, remember, if there's any tzad sakana, you're not allowed to wait. The words of the Mechaber were, you can ask an Eini Yehudi lasis le refuah. You can ask an Eini Yehudi to do something for the chayla for refuah purposes. Says the Mishnah Berurah, afilu b'malacha daraisa. You're even allowed to ask the Eini Yehudi to perform isurei daraisa on behalf of this chayla. V'huadin shartz rachav, and it doesn't have to be specifically refuah. In other words, giving an injection that is making a chabura on Shabbos. Now you might think, okay, the Mechaber says you have this chayla she'ein by sakana, you could ask an Eini Yehudi to do refuah. Okay, I could ask the nurse to go give him an injection, because that's a refuah. But if the guy is laying here in bed and suffering and he needs a hot tea, he can't eat, he can't drink because he's in agony in his throat, and you want him to have a hot tea. Could I ask the Eini Yehudi to make him a hot tea? That's bishul, that's isurei daraisa. It's not really refuah. The tea is not going to give him refuah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that's also mutter. V'hu adin shartz rachav kigoin lefais. You could ask an Eini Yehudi to bake for this chayla. Ulevashel, you could ask an Eini Yehudi to cook for this chayla. The kayotza be'elu im tzarich lekach. If this chayla needs these things, you're allowed to ask an Eini Yehudi to go ahead and do it. And this applies to Mechaber said, afilu. No, we didn't get to that yet. Okay, so we'll go right to here in the Mechaber. So the Mechaber so far said, you have this chayla she'ein by sakana, but he's nafal mishkav, he's mitzstar, he's chayli kol gufay. Amir la'akum is mutter. Amir la'akum is mutter even on a daraisa. Amir la'akum is mutter even on a daraisa, even if it's not mamish focused on refuah, even if it's other things that the chayla needs. He needs a hot tea, you could do Amir la'akum and have the guy make him a hot tea. Says the Mechaber weiter, third line down. Aval, however, ein mechalalin alav es haShabbos be'isur daraisa. But you, a Yisrael is not allowed to go be mechal Shabbos and do an isur daraisa on behalf of such a chayla. This chayla is a chayla shei by sakana. There isn't even a suffix, sakanas nefashos. So a yid would not be allowed to go ahead and do isurei daraisa on behalf of this chayla. And says the Mechaber, that's true, afilu yesh by sakanas aver. That's true even if there is a sakana to one of the ill person's limbs. So it's not sakanas nefashos, but there's a sakanas aver. So maybe there's some kind of a sakana, maybe, I'm not a doctor, but maybe there's some kind of a sakana that there's an illness that's going to affect his hand, and his hand will become chas v'chalila, his hand will become damaged. But it's not sakanas nefashos. Says the Mechaber, even if there's a sakanas aver, a yid is not allowed to perform isurei daraisa on behalf of this chayla, because there's no sakana. There's no sakanas nefashos. There's sakanas aver. Now the Mishnah Berurah is going to be very careful to point out that, this question of sakanas aver versus sakanas nefashos, unless you're a medical man, unless you're a doctor, sakanas aver versus sakanas nefashos, depends what kind of condition we're talking about. Certainly there are things that could be a sakanas aver that could very quickly turn into a sakanas nefashos. If you're talking about a raging infection in a foot, right? Especially, don't even get started with, let's say, a diabetic. But if you're talking about a bad infection on a foot, so somebody will look and say, well, it's a foot. Sakanas aver. You can't be mechal Shabbos. Yeah, well, that sakanas aver could very quickly become sakanas nefashos. So don't play with this, all right? This is again where I'm saying that there are shilos that have to be asked over here, because don't be so quick to say, oh, it's only sakonas aver, it's not sakonas nefashos. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says you're not allowed to do, a Yisrael is not allowed to perform malacha daraisa on behalf of the chayla if he's not a chayla sheyesh by sakana, afilu, even if this sakana saver. Says the Mishnah Berurah, l'lihuta l'Yisrael lavar l'Yisrei daraisa calls manchin in a gale l'pikuach nevesh mamish. Because the only heter for a Yisrael to perform Yisrei daraisa is when we're talking about pikuach nefesh. Sakana saver, this kind of sakonas aver is not sakonas nefashos. Ois kat mem tes ayid le'el b'sivav tes diyeshe var b'shadegel b'pikuach nefesh. The Mishnah Berurah jumps in right away and says, "Whoa! Remember we spoke about a makas cholol, internal organs. That's sakonas aver. There definitely are cases where sakonas aver is sakonas nefashos." So the Mishnah Berurah is speaking out. Be very careful over here with this line between sakonas aver and sakonas nefashos. Even other avarim, not makas cholol. If a doctor looks and says, yeah, he's got an infection in his hand, but if you don't stop that infection, it's going to turn into sepsis, chas v'chalila. Or if you don't cure that infection, it's going to turn into cellulitis. That's already sakonas nefashos. Harei k'shar chayli sheyesh by sakana. Okay, now let's go weiter in the mechaber. Third line down, end of the line. Now, so what did we cover so far? We covered over here so far, we're talking about a chayla she'ein by sakana, but he's neifel and mishkav. In the words of the Ramah, he's chayli kol gufay. All right, amir la'akum mutter, even on isurei daraisa. For Yisrael to perform Isurei Daraisa, Aser. Yisrael is not allowed to perform Isurei Daraisa on behalf of a chayla, unless there's at least a suffix of Pekuach Nefesh. But if there isn't even a suffix of Pekuach Nefesh, a Yisrael is not allowed to do Isurei Daraisa. Now, Amira La'akum on an Isurei Daraisa is itself an Isurei D'Rabbanan, right? To go ask an Eini Yehudi to cook, cooking is an Issa D'Oraisa bishul. To ask an Eini Yehudi to do that is an Issa D'Rabbanan. Now, we saw that that's mutter, right? You have this chayla she'ein by sakana. You're allowed to go ask the Eini Yehudi nurse to go make him a tea. So you're allowed to ask the Eini Yehudi to do Isurei Daraisa, which is an Issa D'Rabbanan, right? But now the mechaber wants to know, how about the Yid himself performing Isurei D'Rabbanan, not Amira, not just the Isurei D'Rabbanan of Amira La'akum. How about the Yisrael himself doing an Isurei D'Rabbanan biyadayim? Is that mutter? So on that, the mechaber is going to bring down, I believe, 4 different opinions, and he's going to paskin like the third shita. So we're going to have 4 opinions. We're going to paskin like the third. Let's take a look at it in the mechaber. Says the mechaber, "Ulechalil alav Yisrael be'isur d'Rabbanan biyadayim." As far as the Yisrael going ahead and performing an isur d'Rabbanan biyadayim on behalf of this chayla sheyesh by sakana, we have various opinions. Yesh matirim, you have the Torah quoting the Rambam. Yesh matirim afilu ein by sakana saver. The Rambam, he says a Yisrael is allowed to perform isurei d'Rabbanan on behalf of this chayla she'ein by sakana, even if it's the chayla she'ein by sakana that we discussed in the beginning of the sif. He's a chayla she'ein by sakana, and there isn't even any sakanas either. He's just a chayla she'ein by sakana, neifel lemishkav, chayli kol gufay. The Rambam says, the Torah quotes the Rambam, that Yisrael is allowed to do Isurei D'Rabbanan for that chayla. Okay, let's take a look here. Let's pause for a second, and let's see the Mishnah Berurah on this opinion. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Nun. Okay, so to do an Isur D'Rabbanan on behalf of this chayla, Ois Cotton Nun b'Isur D'Rabbanan, Hayul Kalash Vusim, any Isur D'Rabbanan, Va'afilu b'loi shinui, doing an Isur D'Rabbanan even without a shinui. Umitam disvirle de mamakam chaylu like Azru. The Rambam holds, b'makom chayli lo gazer rabbanon. The Chachamim didn't put in place their isurim when they're dealing with a chayla. So you have a chayla, even though he's a chayla she'ed by sakana, and even though there's certainly no suffix b'kuach nefesh, there isn't even sakanas aver. He just, like I said, he's got strep, and he's got 100.5, which is considered fever. He's got 100.5, he feels horrible, right? Says the Rambam, you could go do Isurei D'Rabbanan for him. Why? Because he's a chayla. And Mavakam chayli loy gazer rabbanan. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting on Aleph. Afilu ein by sakanas aver. And according to the Rambam, this is mutter even if there's no sakanas aver. Dim yesh by sakana. Let's do the math. If he would be a chayla sheyesh by sakana, afilu rak le'aver echad, even if it's just a suffix aver, l'chaladeis, then according to all the opinions, not really all, the first three, levad mideya achrayna, with the exception of the last opinion, ayin sham, mutar liyisrael l'chal alav b'chal hashvusim l'rafoisai. All the first three opinions all agree that if there is sakanas aver, then a Yisrael could go do Isurei D'Rabbanan on behalf of this chayla. The Rambam is saying, even if there's no sakanas aver, you could go do Isurei D'Rabbanan b'yadayim. Va'afilu ein chayla klal b'chal haguf. The truth is that if there's sakanas aver, he doesn't even have to be a chayli kol haguf. Just because there's a sakanas aver, you're allowed to go ahead and perform Isurei D'Rabbanan b'yadayim, according to the first three opinions. Kasam b'chayadam, the Chayadam writes, Kol davar shemutar lasis al yidei Yisrael b'chayli she'ed by sakana, afilu yachal lasis al yidei ein Yehudi mutar. The Chayadam gives us a very important rule. The Chayadam says, any time the halacha is that a Yisrael is allowed to do malacha for a chayla she'en by sakana, then it's mutter even if there's an Ein Yehudi right there who could do it for you. You're not mechuyev to use the Ein Yehudi. If the halacha is that Yisrael is allowed to perform malacha for a chayla she'en by sakana, then he's allowed to do it even if there's an Ein Yehudi available. He doesn't have to use the agency of the Ein Yehudi. Sakanas aver. Again, the case that we're addressing over here is the guy with the strep throat. He's a chayla she'en by sakana. He's noifel mishkav. He's chayli kol gufay. There's no sakanas aver. The Rambam says a Yisrael is allowed to go ahead and do Isurei D'Rabbanan biyadayim for that chayla. So he would be allowed to do any kind of Isurei D'Rabbanan even without a shinui. So, a case, okay? You have this chayla she'en by sakana. It's in the middle of the summer. It's the dog days of summer. It's 98 degrees and humid outside. And the air conditioner is running. And you come into the bedroom of this chayla she'en by sakana, who's neifel mishkav, who's mitztar and is chayli kol gufay, and he has the chills. And he says, I can't take the air conditioner. You want to go ahead and turn off the air conditioner? Turning off the air conditioner is an issa d'Rabbanan. According to the Rambam, you could go ahead and turn off the air conditioner without a shinui even. You don't even have to employ a shinui. If it was something that would be an issa d'Oraisa, but you'll do it klachar yad, you'll do it with a shinui, that becomes an issa d'Rabbanan. So you could go ahead and do an issa d'Oraisa with a shinui, according to the Rambam, because that would make it an issa d'Rabbanan. And Isurei D'Rabbanan, according to the Rambam, you're allowed to do for this chayla, because b'makam chayli lo gazer rabbanan. Now, we're not going to paskin like this Rambam. I'm just trying to show you the strength of the Rambam's position. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter in Nun Beis, Avala b'chol gufay ein a chayla klal, but if we're dealing with somebody who's less sick than this, he's not even a chayla kol gufay, rakshu chayla be'echad me'evarav, just, I don't know, he's got tennis elbow. Or it could be something more severe, even in tennis elbow. He's got some stomach cramps. V'gam ba'oisa ya'ever ain't sakana, but he's not in any kind of sakana. So he's a chayla she'en by sakana. There's no sakana saver. He's not neifel mishkav. He's not chayla kol gufay. L'kul yama lo yishari l'chal kim al yidei Yehudi. Certainly, you can't do Isurei D'Rabbanan or Isurei D'Oraisa. You could maybe Amir la'akum. V'gam dafka b'davar shu b'shum shvus ba'alma. Daz al yidei Yehudi nasa shvus to shvus. V'shari b'miktsas chayla k'da el b'simin shin zayin sif hey. For somebody who's a miktsas chayla, for somebody who's not feeling well, He's got a bug. He's not feeling well. But he's not chayli kol gufay. He's up and around. He didn't go to shul. He's not feeling well. But he's not a chayli kol gufay. He's not neufel mishkav. He doesn't have fever. There's no sakanas aver. There's certainly not even a suffix pekuach nefesh. But he is a miktsas chayli. So then, if you need something done for him that's an Issa D'Rabbanan, you could do Amira La'akum on the Issa D'Rabbanan, because then it's a double D'Rabbanan. The whole Malach is only an Issa D'Rabbanan, and you're doing Amira La'akum, which is a D'Rabbanan. That's a Shvus to Shvus. Shvus to Shvus, B'makum Miktsas Chayli, we already learned earlier in Shin Zayin, is Mutter. Okay, so that was the first opinion to turn the name of the Rambam. Second opinion, 4 lines down near the end of the line. V'yesh Omrim, we have a second opinion. I believe this is the Ran. Yeah, this is the Ran's Shita. V'yesh Omrim, she'em yesh by sakanas aver. The Ran is more machbir than the Rambam. The Ran says, this chayla she'em by sakana, neufel mishkav, chayla kagufay, to do an Issa D'Rabbanan b'yadayim for him, the Ran doesn't like. But, im yesh by sakanas aver, if now it's already escalated, there is a sakanas aver, oisen. Then the Ran says you could do Isur D'Rabbanan. V'im ein by sakanas aver, ein oisen. But if no sakanas aver, then a Yisrael cannot do Isur D'Rabbanan on behalf of this chayla b'yadayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah Konden Gimel, v'im ein by, after chayla akol galaguf, even though this is somebody who's chayli kol gufay, sviralei, the Ran holds, the asur lasis al yidei Yisrael, that Yisrael is not allowed to go do b'yadayim Isur D'Rabbanan. And according to this second opinion, this the Ran would hold that even to do an Issa D'Rabbanan with a shinui is still aser. If it's just a chaylush ein by sakana and there's no sakanas, a chaylush ein by sakana and there's no sakanas aver. Unless there's just no way of getting an Ein Yehudi. In that case, Maidul L'Dei Ashlishis, he would agree to the third opinion, the Mutter Al Yidei Yisrael B'Shinoi, that it would be Mutter for Yisrael to do the Issa D'Rabbanan with a Shinoi. Okay, that was the second opinion, the opinion of the Ran. The Yeshayim, we're 5 lines down, about 2/3 of the way through the line. The Yeshayim, now we have a third Shita. This is the Torah, quoting the Ramban, not the Rambam. The Rambam was the first opinion, the Ran was the second opinion. Now we have the Ramban's opinion. Now pay close attention to this Shita, because this is the Mandi Amar that we're going to paskin like. The third Shita, the Shitas HaRamban. Says the Mechaber, V'yesh, there are those that say, Shem ein by sakana sever. Again, we're talking about this chayla, she'ein by sakana, but he's neufel mishkav, he's chayli kol gufay. Says the Ramban, im ein by sakanas aver, if there isn't even a sakanas aver, oisin, a Yisrael is allowed to perform Yisuri D'Rabbanan b'shinoi, if he employs a shinoi. V'im yesh by sakanas aver, but if there is a sakanas aver, oisin beloy shinoi, then Yisrael could go ahead and perform malacha D'Rabbanan even without a shinoi. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Nun Dalet. Oisin b'shinoi hainu ha'isur D'Rabbanan. A Yisrael could perform Yisur D'Rabbanan with a shinoi. Ve'ein tzarich lechapes acharei Yehudi. What's important about this is that means that you don't have to go search for an Ein Yehudi, because you could go ahead and do the Yisur D'Rabbanan b'yadayim. Just do it by employing a shinoi. So again, you have this fellow, strep throat, 100.5 fever, he feels crummy, you need to do something for him that's an Yisur D'Rabbanan. According to the Ramban, there's no sakanas aver, so you could go ahead and you could do it Yisur D'Rabbanan, but do it with a shinoi. If chas v'chalila there would be a sakanas aver, then you could do the Yisur D'Rabbanan even without a shinoi. Okay. V'yeshayim, and now we come to the fourth opinion. So this again, we're quoting the Rambam. So I'm not sure. I didn't look up the Rambams over here to see what the difference, why the first opinion is quoted. The first opinion was quoted the Torah in the name of the Rambam. If you look in the Berurah Katan Ches, And now we have again Tur in the name of the Rambam. I'm not sure. Okay. The Yeshaymer. This is the most machmer opinion. The Yeshaymer, afilu yesh by sakana sever, even in a case where this chayla she'ed by sakana has a sakana sever, ein oisin loy davar shehu nismach lemalacha da'araisa. This shita divides up Isurei Darabanan. There are Isurei Darabanan that we refer to as being Nismach L'Malacha Da'araisa. There are Isurei Darabanan where the Chazal answered something because very clearly they're worried that if you do this act, you will come to do an Issa Daraisa. The Mishnah Berurah is going to give us an example. Let's say somebody has a problem with his eye. But it's not one of the problems that we learned about earlier where the Mechaber said that an ailment of the eye is automatically sakanas nefashos. We're talking about a minor ailment of the eye. And the cure is to use some kind of a dry medicinal concoction that you smear onto the outside of the eye. Now, this concoction was colored, so it was kind of like eyeshadow. By doing it, by putting it on the eye, there are those Rishonim that say that you're treading very closely to the malach of tzeveya, of dying. There are those Rishonim that say that it's similar to kaisiv, to writing. Now, therefore, the Chazal answered it. The Chazal is an issa d'Rabbanan to put this koil al ha'inayim. That's an issa d'Rabbanan. It's an issa d'Rabbanan that's nismach on a daraisa. The reason why that's also b'Rabbanan is because it's very close to an Issa Daraisa. And we're afraid that if you do this, you're going to come to a Daraisa. So this fourth opinion says, we're dealing with a Chayla she'ein by sakana. Even if there's a sakanas aver, we're not going to let a Yisrael do something which is also b'Darabanan if it's an Issa Darabanan that's nismach al Daraisa. If it's something that's very close to an Issa Daraisa. Udvarim she'ein behem smach malacha, but if it's not an Issa Darabanan that's close to an Issa Daraisa, oisin afilu ein by sakana sever. Then you could go ahead and perform the Issa Darabanan for this chayla she'ein by sakana, even if there's no sakana sever. The divrei asfar hashlish is nirin, and the Mechaber says that he wants to follow the third opinion, the Shita Saramban. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Nun Hey. What's an Issa D'Rabbanan Nismach L'Malacha D'Araisa? Kigoin Likchayil Ayin, to color the eye by putting on this dry medicinal powder. Kigoin Likchayil Ayin Achayli She'ein By Sakana. It has to be a case where it's not Sakana. Uk'Le'el B'Sif Test Shu K'Kaisiv. And the problem over here is that it's very close to writing. Ois Katan Nun Vav. Then you have an Issa D'Rabbanan She'ein Behem. That's not close to Issa D'Araisa. Kigoin Hani She'Mivuarin B'Sif Mem Gimel Ayin Sham. We're going to see such examples in Sif Mem Gimel Emir Tzashem. Ois Katan Nun Zayin Hasfar Hashlishis. The Mechaber wants to go with the third opinion. And here the Mishnah Berurah spells out to us very clearly what the third opinion is. Hainu. She'muter lasai safilu kol hashvusim. A Yisrael is allowed to perform all Isurei D'Rabbanan on behalf of this chayla she'ein by sakana, v'rak al yedei shinui. But he has to do it with a shinui. Imhu chayli kol haguf, as long as the chayla is somebody who's chayli kol haguf, and even the ein by sakana sever, even if there's no sakana sever. Vim yesh by sakana sever. If there is a sakana sever, ain't tzar shinui klal, you don't even need to employ a shinui. The Chain Pershu Atazu Magan Avram, the Chain Kasav Agra, Shadei Azu Iker. The Gra also says that the third opinion is the Iker, Shehidas Roiv HaPoiskim. So again, I think this is what would be Negeya very often. You have somebody who has the flu, you have somebody who has a bad case of strep, you have somebody who has a nasty virus. That's the type of chayli that we're talking about here. If a need arises to do something for this chayla that is an Issa D'Rabbanan, so especially let's say something like muktzah, right? So you could definitely go ahead and do something that's an Issa D'Rabbanan and do it klachayad. If you do it with a shinoi, you could go ahead and you could perform Isurei D'Rabbanan on behalf of such a chayla. Okay, now we go to the Ramah. The Ramah is 2, 4, 6, 6 line, 2, 4, 6, 6 lines off the bottom. Says the Ramah, Hagah. Mutter loymer le'eni Yehudi, you're allowed to instruct an eni Yehudi lasis tafshil katan, to cook something for a katan, she'ein loy malechel, who doesn't have what to eat, to stam tzarke katan kichayla she'ein by sakana dami. Very important Ramah. The Ramah tells us over here that a katan, by default, is a chayla she'ein by sakana. The constitution of a katan, of a minor, is generally speaking considered to be weak. We know that ketanim are much more delicate than adults. Certainly very, very young children, they're much more delicate. And illness could strike them much, much, much harder. But not even illness. Just different types of deprivation could harm them much more than an adult, right? Ketanim don't fast, right? A fast is, they're not mechuyev to fast. But if a katan should fast, it's more risky than it is for an adult. So says the Ramah, if you have a katan and he doesn't have what to eat, and you need somebody to cook something for him, you could do Amira La'akum, and you can ask an Eni Yehudi to go cook on behalf of the katan, because he's considered a chayla she'ein by sakana. Says the Mishnah Berurah katan unches. Now we have to do the math on this. Says the Mishnah Berurah katan unches mutter. V'em eina tinuk ratza lechal kim al yedei imoy. Now, first of all, let's say the child refuses to take any food except that which was prepared by his mother. Says the Mishnah Berurah, "V'meina tidik writes alechal kim al yedei imay mutter lo'eim laha'achilai afilu chalavai eina Yehudi ubishlai afagav de metaltelas muktzah." Let's say the child only wants to accept food from his mother. Now, the child needed milk. You didn't have any milk, so you did Amira La'akum, and you had an Eini Yehudi go ahead and milk a cow. So the Eini Yehudi milked the cow. Now you have the milk, but that milk is muktzah, because that milk wasn't ready to be used when Shabbos came in by Ben Hashmashis. So that milk is muktzah. If the Eini Yehudi went ahead and cooked up a dish, that dish is muktzah, that cooked dish. The mother could go ahead and take it and feed it to the child. Why? Because the child is a chayla she'ein by sakana. The Prima Godim suggests that you should need a shinoi. Well, really, that would be the math. The math would be, we're talking about a chayla she'ein by sakana. There isn't really sakanas aver, so we go with the third shita. So you could do an issa derabanan, but you could only do the issa derabanan with a shinoi. So, you could take the muktzah milk, because that's an issa derabanan, but the Pri Megadim says you should need a shinoi. Again, let's be straight. Do the math, right? You have a tinoik. The tinoik, by default, is considered a chayla she'ein by sakana. We're paskening like the third opinion, the shitas haRamban. So we have a chayla she'ein by sakana. There's no sakana saver. What's the halacha? Amira La'akum is no problem. Amira La'akum you could do even on a daraisa. So you could do Amira La'akum and ask an Eini Yehudi to go cook. It's Amira La'akum on a daraisa on behalf of a chayla she'ein by sakana. We said that that's okay. That you're allowed to do. The question was, is a yid allowed to do malacha biyadayim? For a yid to do malacha d'Rabbanan biyadayim, we paskin like the third opinion. If there's no sakanas aver, so then you could do an issa d'Rabbanan, but you need a shinui. Well, that's what we're talking about here. The mami wants to pick up the muktzah milk or the muktzah dish. To ask the Eini Yehudi to do it, to cook, Amir Lakum, that's fine. But to do something biyadayim like handle muktzah, l'chayra, you should need a shinoi. So that's just Pri Megadim. V'ayin b'Pri Megadim the mitzadik tzasta by shinoi. But that's only a Pri Megadim. There are those who disagree with this Pri Megadim, and the reason they seem to disagree with the Pri Megadim is because it's true. We're talking about muktzah, which is an issa d'Rabbanan, but generally speaking, we're going to treat the muktzah as being a little bit lower level than a regular shvus. The mother should be careful, not whatever has to be cooked for the child, don't put the food into the pot and then let the Eini Yehudi cook it. If you take the ingredients and you put them in the pot, and then you have the Eini Yehudi put the pot on the fire and cook it, You putting the ingredients into the pot is itself an Issa D'Rabbanan. So then you would be doing an Issa D'Rabbanan biyadayim. And for this type of chol shein by sakana, which is no sakana sever, we paskin that you're not allowed to do an Issa D'Rabbanan biyadayim. So don't put the ingredients in the pot. Instruct the Ani Yehudi to put the ingredients in the pot. Okay, let's finish off this sif. 4 lines off the bottom, middle of the line. Let's continue the Ramah. V'chol she'asur lasei al yidei Yisrael. Anything that a Yisrael is not allowed to perform himself on part of the chayla, on behalf of the chayla, you should know that the chayla himself is also not allowed to do it. But if the Eini Yehudi is doing the malacha for the Yisrael, the chayla is allowed to do something. If it's minor, he's allowed to help. The example that we're going to see is, let's say we need the Eini Yehudi to taka apply something to the chayla's eye. So a Yisrael is not allowed to do it because chayla she'ein by sakana, no sakana sever. The Yisrael is not allowed to do Isurei D'Rabbanan on behalf of the chayla. But Amir La'akum is fine. Now the question is, could the Yid, the chayla, could he help the Eini Yehudi? Could he position himself properly? Could he close his eye or open his eye as necessary? The Ramah says yes. The Messiah ain't by mamish, because helping is ain't by mamish. We already saw this previously. The Mishnah Berurah says, it's not only the chayla himself that's allowed to be Messiah, somebody else is also allowed to be Messiah if what he's doing is relatively minor. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what is the bar? What's considered a Messiah ma'at? The bar is if really the guy could accomplish what he needs to accomplish without you. So let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. Kigoy, Eini Yehudi shekaychel sa'ayin. The Eini Yehudi is applying this dye, this dry medicinal powder to the eye that's going to color the eye. So Yisrael's not allowed to do it because it's an Issa D'Rabbanan. The Mishnah Berurah said it's an Issa D'Rabbanan Mishum Kaisiv. Others say it's Mishum Tzaiveya, but it's an Issa D'Rabbanan. So Yisrael's not allowed to do it, but the Eini Yehudi is allowed to do it. Is the Yisrael allowed to help? What does that mean, help? So you're going to ask the chayla, please close your eyes. So he's going to close his eyes. Or you need the help of another Yisrael. So you're going to ask another Yisrael, please hold his eye closed so I could put the powder on. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that's called Messiah Ktsas. Why? Because really the guy could do it without you. The guy will hold the eye closed with his other eye. So that's why it's called Messiah Ktsas. The Yisrael Seiger Pesach is a Yid, maybe the Chayla himself or somebody else will open and close the eye. Sheikanis by a Chayl, so the Chayl could go in. Avalameni Yachalasa is built to Yisrael, but if the Eini Yehudi cannot do it without the help of the Yisrael, then the Yisrael is not allowed to help. Umashpa da filu b'malacha daraisa mesayeh ein by mamish. I just got samachalaf ein by mamish. I am betaz b'machakasam bazeh v'ayil elbim sh'terusim kat yud aleph, where we already discussed this. Shabach reidim cholkim al zeh. Okay, very complex topic. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The scripture of limud HaTorah should be begun on Glantz Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should said, Yeshua's refuahs parnaset sheduchim to those in need. We should be zeicher to see the BS called Tzedek b'mher v'yameinu amen. We will continue next time. Yisrael with Sif Yod Ches. Be well.